35 years in the cockpit. Over 40,000 hours of flight time. He had seen thunderstorms, bird strikes, hydraulic warnings, and near misses. But in 35 years, not once had an engine ever failed on him. Not once. Until Flight 2247. A Tuesday morning. Clear skies. A routine hop from Chicago to Denver. And then, at 28,000 feet, the world changed. Hard cut to silence. Then title card. It was just another Tuesday. Captain James Holloway woke up at 4:47 a.m. on March 14, 2019. Same as every other morning. He made coffee, black, no sugar, checked the weather report on his phone, and drove to O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. The drive took 34 minutes. He had done it hundreds of times. At the gate, his crew was already assembled. First Officer Sarah Chin, 29 years old, 4 years into her career. A sharp, focused pilot who Holloway had flown with twice before. Flight attendants ran through their pre-boarding checks. Ground crew loaded luggage. Fuel trucks finished their work. The plane was a Boeing 737-800. Tail number N872WA. Built in 2011. Fully certified. Last maintenance check completed just 9 days earlier. Everything passed. The manifest showed 168 passengers. Families heading to Denver for spring break. Business travelers with laptops already open. A few college students going home for the holidays. A woman traveling alone with a newborn. Nobody on that plane thought today was different. And why would they? Chicago to Denver is a 2-hour 15-minute flight. Airlines operate it dozens of times a day. It is one of the most flown domestic routes in the United States. Captain Holloway completed his pre-flight walkaround at 6:12 a.m. He checked the fuselage, inspected the landing gear, looked over the engine cowlings, reviewed the logbook. Everything was normal. He settled into the left seat of the cockpit at 6:24 a.m. First Officer Chin took the right seat. Checklists were completed methodically, fuel load confirmed, avionics tested, systems armed. At 6:51 a.m., Flight 2247 pushed back from gate H14. At 7:09 a.m., it lifted off runway 28R. The weather was perfect. Visibility unlimited. Light tailwind. Cruise altitude assigned, 28,000 feet. By all measures, this was the most boring flight of the week. 3 signs. All of them real. At 7:44 a.m., 35 minutes into the flight, the first indication appeared. Engine 1, the left engine, showed a very slight rise in EGT. That stands for exhaust gas temperature. The number ticked up by about 12 degrees. Small. Within limits technically. But slightly outside the normal trend for that phase of cruise flight. Captain Holloway noticed it. He glanced at the display, held his attention on it for about 4 seconds, then looked away. He would later tell investigators. I noted it. I filed it mentally. But it was within range, so I moved on. 7 minutes later, at 7:51 a.m., the second sign appeared. Engine 1's oil pressure reading dropped, subtly. Not dramatically. Not enough to trigger an ICA's warning on the display. Just a quiet, gentle dip. The kind that could be a sensor fluctuation, a temporary data glitch, or nothing at all. First Officer Chin saw it too. She pointed at the display and said, and this is recorded on the cockpit voice recorder. That dip again. Captain Holloway responded. I see it. Watching it. And they continued. The third sign came at 8:03 a.m. A faint but unmistakable vibration. Not violent. Not alarming. Just different. A barely perceptible change in the engine's sound signature, something pilots with decades of experience sometimes describe as the engine talking to you. Captain Holloway had 35 years of experience. He heard it. But he also had 35 years of experience telling him that engines make sounds. That vibrations happen at altitude. that sensors throw false readings. That in 35 years, not a single engine had ever actually failed on him. His experience was his greatest asset. And in this moment, it was also his blind spot. Why didn't they stop? Here is the part of this story that is hardest to understand from the outside. 3 warning signs. An experienced crew. Why did the flight continue? The answer is not negligence. It is not recklessness. It is something far more human, and far more dangerous. It is called normalcy bias. When experienced pilots see small deviations, their brains, shaped by thousands of hours of uneventful flight, immediately reach for the most likely explanation. Sensor glitch. Temperature variation. Transient vibration. This is not carelessness. This is pattern recognition doing exactly what it was trained to do. Captain Holloway was not ignoring the warnings. He was interpreting them through a 35-year lens that had never once seen an engine actually fail. There is also a second factor, confirmation bias. After the third sign appeared, Holloway checked the EGT reading again. It had stabilized. The oil pressure had returned to normal range. The vibration had quieted. His brain said, "See? You were right." False alarm. First Officer Chen, as the junior pilot, had mentioned the readings twice. But she deferred, as crews often do, to the captain's interpretation. These are not excuses. They are the exact mechanisms that aviation safety investigators study, that simulator programs are designed to break, and that safety culture reforms have spent decades trying to address. The flight continued toward Denver. They had 41 minutes left. And then the engine died. 8:19 a.m. At 28,000 feet over eastern Colorado, Engine 1 on Flight 2247 failed. Not a warning. Not a flicker. A full, unambiguous engine failure. The ICAs lit up. The master warning chimed. The left engine's thrust went to 0. The aircraft yawed sharply to the left as the asymmetric thrust pulled the nose sideways. In the cockpit, Captain Holloway had approximately 0.8 seconds before muscle memory took over. Left rudder. Right thrust lever to maintain speed. Engine failure checklist. Immediate action items recalled from memory before the laminated card was even reached. First Officer Chen called out the checklist. Holloway executed. ATC was notified within 90 seconds. Denver Center, United 2247, we have an engine failure, Engine 1, requesting immediate descent to 14,000. Denver Center responded instantly. Traffic was cleared. A new flight path was issued. Emergency services at Denver International Airport were notified and began positioning. In the cabin, passengers felt the aircraft jolt. The silence of one engine was replaced by the sound of the other working harder. A flight attendant made a calm, deliberate PA announcement. Several passengers gripped their armrests. The woman with the newborn pressed her child closer. The aircraft descended. Captain Holloway flew the approach on one engine, something he had practiced in simulators dozens of times but never once done in a real aircraft with real passengers and real airspace over real Colorado. At 9:04 a.m., 45 minutes after the failure, Flight 2247 touched down safely at Denver International Airport on runway 16R. All 168 passengers walked off that plane. Every single one. What the engine actually revealed. The NTSB opened a formal investigation within hours of landing. Engine 1 was removed from the aircraft and transported to a maintenance facility in Tulsa, Oklahoma for teardown and analysis. What investigators found inside that engine told a story that had been building for months, not hours. A high-pressure turbine blade had developed a hairline fatigue crack. The crack was microscopic in origin, the kind that forms over thousands of flight cycles as metal repeatedly heats, expands, cools, and contracts. Over time, under repeated stress, the crack had propagated deeper into the blade structure. The 9-day-old maintenance check had not detected it. Why? Because the inspection protocol for that component required removal of the engine for internal bore scope inspection only at specific cycle intervals, and Flight 2247's engine was 47 cycles short of that threshold. The EGT rise, the oil pressure dip, the vibration. All three were this blade, failing slowly, quietly, sending signals through the instruments that the aircraft was designed to transmit. The investigation also examined the crew's decision-making. The CVR data was reviewed. Both pilots were interviewed. Their actions from the moment of failure were found to be textbook, immediate action items executed correctly, ATC communication professional, approach and landing handled with precision. The question the investigation focused on was the 39 minutes between the first warning and the failure. Who was responsible, and what changed? The NTSB's final report, released 14 months after the incident, reached several significant conclusions. First, the engine failure was a maintenance and inspection protocol failure, not a crew failure. The blade defect was present and undetectable under existing inspection requirements. The airline, the maintenance provider, and the FAA's inspection cycle standards were all flagged. Second, the crew's response to the in-flight warning signs was classified as within acceptable norms given existing guidance, which is investigator language for what they did was understandable, but the system needs to change so it doesn't happen again. Third, and this is the part that actually matters for every flight you will ever take, the report issued 3 safety recommendations that went directly to the FAA. 1. Revise inspection cycle thresholds for high-pressure turbine blades on CFM56 series engines, the engine type found on hundreds of Boeing 737s and Airbus A320s worldwide. 2. Update crew training to include specific simulator scenarios focusing on subtle, multi-signal warning patterns that fall below ICA's alert thresholds. 3. Establish clearer crew resource management protocols for when a junior officer raises a concern about a reading that the captain has not acted on. Within 18 months of the report, all 3 recommendations had been incorporated into FAA directives. Captain James Holloway retired from flying 8 months after the incident. Not because he was forced to. Because, as he told an interviewer from an aviation safety journal, he felt he had been given something very few pilots ever receive, a complete story, with a safe ending, and a lesson worth passing on. He now teaches human factors and crew resource management at an aviation training academy in Phoenix, Arizona. He still drinks his coffee black. The lesson at 28,000 feet. Here is what this story is really about. It is not about a pilot who made a mistake. It is about a system. A human system, a technical system, a training system, that had a gap in it. And one Tuesday morning over Colorado, that gap became visible. Captain Holloway's 35 years of experience saved 168 people after the failure. There is no question about that. His hands, his memory, his training, all of it worked perfectly in the moment that mattered most. But those same 35 years, that deep, trusted, earned experience, made it harder to take seriously the quiet signals that came before. That tension, between experience as a strength and experience as a filter, is one of the most studied problems in aviation psychology. And it does not only live in cockpits. It lives in hospitals, in construction sites, in operating rooms, in boardrooms. Anywhere that expertise and pattern recognition are required, the same risk exists. The next time something small feels slightly off, and your brain reaches for the comfortable explanation, remember this story. Sometimes the engine is fine. And sometimes it is 47 cycles from telling you something you needed to hear 39 minutes ago. If this story made you think differently about experience and warning signs, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to go deeper on the human factors side of aviation, the psychology of why pilots miss what's right in front of them, that video is coming next week. Subscribe so you don't miss it.